what's checking, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Orangebloods Modcast. I'm back. It is the Orangebloods Texas football channel, by the way. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. We enjoy all those things. Jason, Anwar, Alex, all with me today. And fellas, yesterday was an open practice. There's a lot of places that we could begin. I suppose as someone that read your updates and clicked on the threads and followed it like so many of the other Orangebloods subscribers, I kind of want to just start 30,000 feet in the air. And Jason, I'll come to you first. Where's your head at? Just, you've seen now a full practice. You've seen this team in small doses, quite a bit actually, since the beginning of camp. Where's your head? What are you thinking about the most in terms of coming home last night from that practice? You were thinking about what?
Well, it's a good question. Walking out of the stadium last night, I was walking out with Blake Skaggs, our Orangebloods cohorts, and he kind of asked me the same thing. Hey, did tonight change your opinions on anything? Quarterback, record, projected record, all this stuff. And listen, I'm an offensive guy. I've always said that. I like to see fireworks. I always get suckered into, hey, the offensive team is going to win the championship and going to win the Super Bowl, and it always ends up being, the Ravens with their defense that win the Super Bowl. But my first takeaway, as I was telling Blake, is like, I need to see more from this offense, honestly. And I'm kind of torn on that because you guys have heard me say it. Those people who've seen me on this video and these podcasts, I'm a Sark guy, man. I love what he does offensively. I compared him to Lincoln Riley. So I have faith that Sark's going to get him there, but I think there's still a lot of room for improvement from this offense. We weren't terrible yesterday in the open practice, and a lot of check downs, a lot of dinks and dunks, but anytime they took a shot downfield, it was either incomplete, intercepted, or nearly intercepted. I'm expecting more big play potential, maybe more big play pop out of this offense at some point. Don't feel like we've seen it so far, including what we heard about last weekend's scrimmage. I'll be curious if this weekend's scrimmage is any different, but I don't want to start us off on a Debbie Downer. I'm not saying that because the defense looks really good. That's the flip side of all this. Hey, when the offense isn't running up and down the field, you got to tip your hat to the defense. They applied pressure. They did well there. The secondary, I thought, played pretty well. But I am still expecting to see more out of this offense and out of the quarterback play. They've got a couple weeks to get that figured out, and that's what I'll be looking forward to see if they can kind of get that figured out for the season opener.
Alex, same question. Forget about what Jason said, because I don't want him to impact you necessarily. And we can circle back to everybody's thoughts, but as best as possible, your headspace is where after seeing this team as much as you've been able to.
Yeah, and we've got to see him a lot, right? It's been a good year for access for sure. Yesterday was definitely the best, getting to take in like 5 or 6 different team periods and different situations, and kind of getting to see the ones versus the ones, the twos versus the twos, how those guys stack up. The defense looks good. The defense to me looks a lot more innovative than I would have thought based on the only getting to see 5 periods of practice through the beginning, through the open windows of the first 5 or 6 practices that we've seen. We got to see some team drills with some of the substitutions that were occurring with the ones, with the twos, Alfred Collins at defensive end. That's something that we hadn't seen at practice before, but boy, that looked good. There were just some things some wrinkles that were thrown in, both in base and in nickel that, you find interesting. Some blitzing and stuff that felt really exciting, some blitzes coming from weird spots that my brain just wasn't used to seeing under the previous, defensive coordinators around here. The offense, as I was walking out, do you know what I began thinking to myself? I began thinking to myself that the tight ends in this offense are going to need to make plays. The running back is going to need to be leaned on. Bijan's going to have a big year if he stays healthy. Jordan Whittington's going to have a big year if he stays healthy. And I just began thinking, with all the quarterback stuff, and this is, I'm going real meta here, so if this is too far off, it's fine. But with all the quarterback stuff, I'm not sure these outside receivers but outside of Joshua Moore, Troy O'Meara yesterday looked like he was kind of coming back into some form. He had his brace off, all this stuff. Then he gets banged up. He comes back on with the brace on. He's running now after the brace goes back on worse than he was. It seemed like even before when he had the huge sleeve on earlier in practice. So you worry about his readiness for week one. And outside of those two guys outside, it's pretty rough with those outside wide receivers. When you think about how these quarterbacks win with the players they can connect with, Hudson Card's the one who can bomb it down the field to these wide receivers that can get open on these 9 routes and these go routes and these deep posts a little bit better than Casey Thompson. I'm wondering if this is an offense where it's going to be dumping it off to running backs, getting it into the hands of these really good. I mean, Blake Wiley looks, or Jared Wiley. Blake Wiley was a friend of mine from college. Jared Wiley looks really good out there. Juan Davis has continued to surprise me through camp, is looking really good. Of course, Jatavian Sanders. Everybody knows what they have in Cade Brewer. Gunnar Helm caught a touchdown yesterday. These tight ends actually look really good. And this is coming from me, Ketch. And you know me, I'm the guy who charts the tight end alignment, saying you guys are using 2 tight end too much. We have here on this roster, when you look at it, so many good wide receivers. And I was saying that as recently as last year. I'm not sure that's going to be the case again this year. I see this as more of a Bijan Robinson tight end centric attack with your occasional shots down the field. And I just wonder, with the way Hudson Card throws that ball, man, with so much zip and over the middle, he gets to him quick, man, but that ball's not as catchable to these tight ends and to these running backs as it is. I mean, Hudson fires it in there. So I wonder how much those guys, those sort of intermediate targets feel about the catchability of his ball versus Casey's ball. To me, it's just a little bit of a storyline that I'll be following, but the offense, to me, it feels like it's going to be a Bijan Robinson offense. Definitely more involvement from the tight ends than we would have expected. And I do expect Jordan Whittington to lead the team in receptions.
Anwar, I'm coming to you next. And I suppose in asking this very broad question, I've been somewhat surprised by the amount of depth that is in both Jason and Alex's brains. Like, what's going on in your brain today? They both are thinking a lot of things. Are you thinking a lot of things, or is there a more centralized thought process for you?
Well, I was able to think of what I would say the positives and the negatives are from what I've been able to see. I think, building off what Alex said, like the obvious positive is Bijan Robinson, and you can obviously see that that's going to be someone they're probably going to have to lean on a lot this season. I think Alex would agree. I thought the offensive line looked a little bit better in one-on-one drills yesterday than I had expected, especially after we heard from the past scrimmage how poorly they played. So it's an interesting thing, like in one-on-one, they looked really good. They dominated the defense in those drills. So I was kind of thrown off by seeing that. But I feel like maybe that's somewhat of a positive. A negative, surprised no one touched on, is there's a lot of drop balls. I mean, I know we talked about like Hudson and what he does from a passing standpoint. There were just a lot of easy passes that were consistently dropped. I was really surprised at how many just simple passes that were dropped by these receivers, and what that looks like. And, and I don't know what to make out of the defense, Ketch, because while we're saying these things are good, the interesting part is what's a good defense in the Big 12, So, I asked Kwiatkowski about this yesterday, and he told me, well, their goal is to hold teams to under 20 points a game. That may be ambitious, but that's their goal. Well, OU averaged 43 points a game. So that's a hard thing to do. And we've seen a lot of defensive coordinators come into the Big 12, especially Texas, with these lofty goals and have to kind of shift what their definition of success is. West Virginia ended up being the best defense last year from a yards per game standpoint, and they gave up 291. So I don't know really what to make of the defense until I actually see them with the bullets flying. So I did see some positive things, but I think for me, the most concerning aspect of anything I saw was just the amount of drops by the receivers.
Well, and I think that the purpose of today's modcast isn't to be negative. We're talking about positives and negatives, and I apologize in advance for someone who's at this point thinking Ketch asked something positive, but it's hard to hear the three of you talk, and it's hard to think about the direction that I think the reports have kind of been coming in. There's been a lot of conversation about the quarterbacks, but it feels like very quietly the wide receiver position maybe has even overtaken the offensive line position as maybe the most curious and questionable unit on this offense right now. That, and I don't even say that in the context of the offensive line did better yesterday, right? I mean, it's not even necessarily about that group did well yesterday, so they're not less of a problem. It feels like a trend, Anwar, has been there's Whittington, there's Worthy when he's healthy, and he wasn't on the field yesterday because he came down with a cold of some sorts, non-COVID. And then you've got Whittington, Worthy, and Moore.
O'Mary, if he's healthy, if he can stay healthy.
But it doesn't sound like one guy at receiver outside of that very small core of guys has made a leap forward this year. And that feels, or this month more than this year, although I guess it's an extension of the two, that feels like a big disappointment when you consider it's a position with a lot of guys. Sark shows up on campus and he's like, my God, how many scholarship receivers do we have? And we get into August and the answer would be not enough.
Well, Kelvontae Dixon's been a little bit banged. He was a little bit banged up to start camp, and he was somebody who, I think he's kind of come on a little bit slowly. And to me, I would just say I don't see any issue with the inside wide receivers. I mean, that's Jordan Whittington, that's Xavier Worthy. Behind them, you have Dejon Harrison, who I've thought looked sneaky kind of good through camp. He didn't have as good a day yesterday. He was with some of those drops. It's just when you get to these outside guys, especially when Troy O'Meary is not out there these last few days, whenever Joshua Moore wasn't able to get out there. I mean, the first guys up have been, Marcus Washington, maybe Alvonte Woodard, guys like Casey Kane are just running with the twos. He had a couple bad drops yesterday. Even walk-ons like 82, like I don't even know his name, but these guys working with the twos at times at those outside wide receiver positions. It just feels like, a couple of injuries, man, the depth there really, really goes quick. And it just seems like it happened fast. Like you said, Ketch, how many years were we talking about just what an embarrassment of riches at the wide receiver position? It's like, how do you get all these guys on the field? Like, what are you guys doing talking about trying to run 12 personnel? You need to have 3 wide receivers on the field, because otherwise you're leaving money on the table. It doesn't feel like that with these outside guys. The good news is that they do have personnel groupings where it's 2 tight ends. And even though Whittington and Worthy both play out of the slot, where they have those 2 guys out on the field with Worthy split out wide and Whittington inside. So I think we'll be seeing that a good bit, but it's just like, again, if and when injuries occur, where's the depth? And to me, it's more of the guys on the outside who play those traditional outside wide receivers that we probably need to be most worried about.
Alex,
I tried real quick. I tried to log every play last night in scrimmage and 7-on-7. I probably missed a couple because there's 3 things going on at once. But in going through my notes last night, as I'm transcribing literally every single play, 2 things stood out to me. One was what Anwar noticed, like, damn, the offensive line won like 80% of these one-on-one battles. And in my mind, I'm thinking, God, am I grading it too leniently for the offensive line?
And those are drills that the offensive line is designed to lose, the 2.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, there were guys like Byron Murphy blew up a couple reps, but by and large, the offensive line dominated. The second part that really stood out to me, and as I'm taking these notes by hand in my notebook, you don't really have time to process it and digest it, because literally there's 7-on-7 work going on here, offensive line, defensive line work going over here. You're trying to just bounce back and forth. You don't really process. You're just scribbling numbers and notes. Last night, as I'm transcribing it for Orangebloods, I'm thinking Marcus Washington and Kai Money got far more passes thrown their way than anybody else on the roster. And listen, Marcus was a fairly highly rated recruit. Kai has played a little bit here and there, but that's not with all due respect to those guys, that's not a recipe for success if you want to compete at a high level. You've got to have the guys we've been talking about. I mean, Xavier Worthy wasn't there yesterday. O'Meary was banged up. Whittington had a couple passes thrown his way. I mean, Washington dropped what should have been an easy touchdown pass. Alex mentioned Casey Kane dropping the ball downfield. I mean, I know Alex said, hey, it's been an embarrassment of riches. And Texas has had a lot of bodies. I don't know that I'd call it riches necessarily. They've got to have some of those guys really elevate their game. But, the key guys that we've talked about here, Whittington, Worthy, Joshua Moore, and Troy O'Meary, they've got to get those guys healthy. And even those guys have got to take steps forward. I mean, we know what they're capable. We're pretty sure what they're capable of, but we need to see it consistently in a Steve Sarkisian offense. So, when I was going through my notes yesterday, I was just shocked. And I don't have it in front of me, but I bet if I went through, Kai Money and Marcus Washington probably far outdistanced everybody else in terms of targets.
Alex, for you, is it as simple as, it feels like 12 personnel is like a buzzword for about half a decade now that we've been talking. Herman loved it. And you kind of went into it, about 5 minutes ago and talking about the back and forth between two tight ends go on the field, one receiver comes off of it. Is this, though, going to be an offense that does a lot of two tight end sets, and that in this age of wide open offenses, and look, Sarkisian shows up from Alabama, and that's kind of been his MO too, right? To spread them out, put best athletes on the field. Do you think this ends up being that type of offense, though, where those two personnel groupings end up being kind of the flavor of the offense early on?
I'm not so sure about the two back stuff. I mean, I wouldn't be against it at all. That would seem like a really good way to get a guy like Keelan Robinson involved that has so much of a different body makeup and physical body type than some of the others. So two backs, two tight ends. I guess you could probably see it. I think what will be different this time than last year, if I just look at it. So just last year, the tight ends that played, Texas played basically four tight ends last season. Cade Brewer he played 414 snaps. He was in line only 7.73% of the time. He was either split out or at H-back between 46% of the time and 45% of the time. Jared Wiley last year, 279 snaps. He played in line only 25% of the time. He was split out wide 34% of the time. He was lined up at an H-back 39.7% of the time. Malcolm Epps, who's gone, 57 snaps. He was in line only 15% of the time. He was at split out 35% of the time. He was at H-back 50% of the time. And then Braden Liebrock, who has a shoulder injury right now, is in a sling, 28 snaps last year, only 7% in line, split out almost 60% of the time. H-back at about 35% of the time. So when I look at that, I see that nobody played in line at more than 25% of snaps, which was Jared Wiley. That's going to change. They're going to have one in-line guy there, and it's going to be one H-back guy. So I think we're going to see less of these guys split out. We don't see that as often. I did see Jatavian Sanders last night split out on a few series with the twos, but generally, man, these guys have been at sort of these H-back sort of sniffer kind of roles, these sort of, flanker type of, lined up off of the back outside hip of the tackle, back behind the line of scrimmage, and then the other guy in line. And that's what they've been working on in these blocking drills. They do so much blocking drills with the rest of the offensive group. So I see that sort of being the case with the occasional guy like Juan Davis or Jatavian Sanders, who really do feel like they're kind of, I don't want to call them wide receiver tweeners because they're not. They're both big, beastly guys, but they're both guys who can get out in space and really catch. So I think if we're going to see these guys split out, we're not going to see Cade Brewer split out 45% of the damn time. That's not how this offense is going to go. Like, that's not how it's going to go. I feel like, Malcolm Epps was split out the most of any of these guys last year, and that kind of makes sense. He was a converted wide receiver. I think if we're going to see guys split out, it'll be Jatavian, it'll be Juan Davis, but everybody's going to need to get a lot better as inline blockers. And I felt like when you just seen them in live in practice, it helped. I mean, the offensive line looked good, but these tight ends look pretty good as blockers. I mean, we talked yesterday about how Christian Jones looked really good on that one Bijan Robinson play where he got the really good reach block on Jacoby Jones and just opened up a really, really wide lane for him to bounce it outside. So I think that the tight ends, we'll see them more in line. We'll see them utilized as more of these helpers to get the run game going, because the run game needs to get going. But I feel like they'll be utilized, even though there was, Tom Herman always wanted to use this stuff. I just feel like it'll be 12 personnel that'll be utilized differently than it was under Herman.
Anwar, if we change directions, I want to ask you, I'm going to steal from my DeMarvion Overshown interviews, the Demo show. If we go positive and we completely change directions in the conversation, and I say your Attaboy award for the entire camp, I'm going to ask all three of you guys the same question. Who do you give an Attaboy award in camp? Maybe not necessarily the best player, but a guy who's constantly catching your eye. You can define it however you want to, but I've been interested to see the names that some of the players have given. Anthony Cook was mentioned early on by Jordan Whittington, and you and I both thought when he said that at the time that he was hooking up his boy a little bit of YouTube love for like a friend of his. And then it turns out that throughout camp, Anthony Cook's a name that keeps popping up. I'm curious for you, who's been a name that keeps popping up?
That's a fascinating question.
Thank you.
Don't you take my guy again, Anwar. I've got.
Do you want Jason to go first?
Jason goes first. Jason, go first.
I don't think anybody's going to pick Jason's guy.
Taking people's stuff.
You want me to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was curious. I've got two, and they're both off the beaten path, so I didn't think you'd pick either one of them.
I was going to take the punter.
Ah, you son of a that's one of them. Isaac Pearson, the freshman Aussie punter.
Good, man.
I already claimed dibs on him, man. But seriously, I do. Every time I watch that guy, he hits the ball. He reminds me of Michael Dixon. I kind of said that in my practice notes last night, and he is so far and away the leading punter on this team. And I know people go, "Oh, punter." Hey, those punters can make a huge difference in field position, ultimately wins and losses. Bushevsky's not even a factor at this point. Yesterday it was all Pearson taking every rep. Bushevsky in the early drills got some work, but when it was punt block, punt return, team drills, it was all Isaac Pearson, the true freshman out of Pro Kick Australia. So he's one. And then the other one for me, if I just keep thinking name, you're going to always hear about Bijan. You're going to always hear about Jay Witt, okay? But it's going to be Luke Brockermeyer, man. He had another interception last night, 7-on-7. It seems like damn near every practice we hear about Luke Brockermeyer getting his hand on the football some sort of way, oftentimes in an interception. So, I think Alex mentioned like after one or two practices, it's like he never gets subbed out. And you know what? He doesn't. And I don't think it's going to happen with the way he's playing. Like I said, he had another interception last night. It was 7-on-7 work. We'll have to kind of wait to see how he fares when it's full contact 11-on-11. But knowing what I know of Luke, I think he does have a nose for the football in those situations as well. But certainly in the passing game situations, he's been a big factor. So I think Luke Brockermeyer has been a kind of a nice, pleasant surprise for me.
Anwar, do you have your guy, or do I need to go to Alex?
I don't know if there's a guy. I'll take a couple that just kind of stood out, and so off the beaten path. I've liked Vernon Broughton for some odd reason when I've seen him out there. Just the big body, really fast, very, very mobile. There's just things I like about him when I see him play that there's a part of me that thinks at some point, I don't know if it's this year or not, but he's a guy that I think can have an impact. He's still young, but I like him from a young perspective. I do like Jatavian Sanders. I don't think that's going off too far off the beaten path. I think at some point he will be, live up to all the expectations, everything that Jason wrote about him in high school, everything Alex has said about him in practice, catch everything you said about him as well. You could just see it. Big guy, but incredibly soft hands, just really, really soft hands. Love the way he doesn't, catch the ball with his body at all. I still think he's I still wish he'd play defense. I still think there's leaving some money on the table potentially by, being a really good defensive player as opposed to playing the tight end position. But that being said, I think he can have an impact. And the only other guy that I would say, and Alex has mentioned him a little bit, but I won't say my super attaboy, but my guy that I say at some point, I'm like, Dejon Harrison is a guy that every once in a while I'm looking around, I'm like, that was a spectacular play. That wasn't too bad. Like, that was pretty good. And he's got the green jersey on, so there's a little bit of limitations with him, but he's a guy that I feel like every time I turn around, he's diving in the back of the end zone for a spectacular catch.
Alex, you got an Attaboy award for the camp so far?
Yeah, I mean, Anwar mentioned the Jatavion. I think that's a really good one. I the more and more I watch practice, I just have two more. The more and more I watch practice, I really like Juan Davis. He looks like he's put together so well. He's a really good catcher of the football too. He's a big physical guy too. I think he's going to be between Juan Davis and Jatavion Sanders, I think those guys are going to be factors together in some kind of cool way. I don't know exactly how. But then my biggest attaboy for all of camp is Hayden Connor, the freshman offensive lineman. He's been versatile enough to sub in with the twos and sometimes even the ones whenever they do these kind of big substitutions with the ones to see how a group looks radically different, where they take Angle out and put him at center and, get out Okafor and put in Connor and, move Carrick from right to left tackle or, something like this. Connor has taken basically everything that he's been taught by Coach Flood. And, our view of practice is this interesting view. We got to stand at the north side of practice the whole time. And the offensive line practices right there in that end zone. And, the defense practices way over the other end zone. So the coverage of the offense has been a lot easier this camp. But it's been cool for me just to get to watch and understand what's being taught with these various reach blocks and these various techniques and everything. And it's just crazy, man. How Hayden Connor he never forgets anything. It's always, every time he's up, it's just good, good job, Hayden, where it's like some of these guys, Coach Flood's throwing his hat on the ground saying, God damn it, how many times do I need to tell you? It's Connor's out there with really good feet. He moves better than you would think for his size. And he's big too. I mean, he's really, really big. Let me see what his weight is here on the roster.
He is like an aerospace engineering majors or something. Yeah, so it shouldn't shock that he absorbs things pretty quickly.
6'5", 332, and smart as a damn whip, and moves well. I mean, he's the sixth best offensive lineman that Texas has right now, seventh best, because you consider Carrick is probably the sixth, but he's the seventh best offensive lineman that Texas has right now. And I can't say that I was expecting that, even coming out of spring ball, where I was kind of impressed by him. Feels like he's continued to take steps, leaps and bounds forward. And I think that goes a lot to show, like Jason said, for his intellect, his coachability, and also, man, for the fact that Coach Flood's a pretty good coach, man. If he can get a pupil in there and kind of a good piece of clay to mold the way that he wants.
Hey, Ketch, real quick, we're kind of picking guys that are a little more unheralded for our attaboys. I think two guys that I've seen, and I saw it again yesterday, both corners, I thought Josh Thompson and Deshaun Jameson both played really well, both made plays on the ball downfield. They weren't tested a lot, but the few times that Hudson, I think, and then maybe Casey once took shots downfield, they were both there to make up plays. They both had pass breakups in the end zone. So two veteran cornerbacks, I think, are playing well as well.
And I thought Josh was really good on special teams as well, on the punt block units. I thought there was a couple that if he went for it, he probably could have blocked it.
The cornerbacks are probably in the Quentin Jammer stage. I can remember when Jammer was on campus 20 years ago, no one ever threw his way. So practices and games would go by and people would be like, Jammer didn't do anything. It was like, well, he was only targeted twice and he gave up one reception for 9 yards. Like, I think we can say he did something.
Shut down half the field is all,
Yeah, I think Thompson and Jameson, nobody mentions their names on a daily basis for the most part, but that just means they were getting burned. Everybody would be like, oh God, I'm always hearing those guys getting burned. It's okay when your corners have quiet days, I think. If we go to the other side of the, if we've given out our Attaboy awards, what in the world? Like,
Water break.
yeah, sometimes I hate phones. If I invented an award called the Come On Son, a guy in camp that just needs to bring it a little bit more, and maybe it's because they just haven't played well enough yet or at the level that people are expecting, or just because a unit needs more out of them. And maybe it's not fair to say this guy's got to do more, but in order for this unit to get what it needs more. If we're given a Come On Son award, Jason, do you have somebody instinctively that if you could pick anybody for the next week and a half to really turn it up a notch, who would it be? No quarterbacks either.
Yeah. I'm looking at just trying to think from last night. I mean, it would probably be at the wide receiver position, but that kind of goes, I don't know. I'm looking at my starting defensive notes here. Most of those guys made plays. I didn't notate anything from Ray Thornton. And that's not to say, I mean, I'm focused on one practice here, so I don't want to say a blanket statement saying he hasn't done anything all fall camp, of course. But I mean, I'm looking at my notes and most of the other guys. Okay, I remember him doing something. I don't remember seeing much of Ray Thornton. I remember the interior guys getting some pressure, getting a couple sacks. Tavondre Sweat did. Coburn was good in one-on-ones. I don't remember seeing or notating anything from Ray Thornton. So I guess off the top of my head, he would probably be one that jumps out, certainly among the starting lineup.
Anwar, what about you?
You took the quarterbacks off the board?
Yeah.
Okay. But if you're taking the quarterbacks off the board, I'd probably say a little bit. I'd probably say give it a little bit to Devin Richardson. That's a guy that we thought, based off of what he did previously at New Mexico State, that he would come in and have potentially instant impact. Haven't really seen that so far. So if there was a guy you'd say, hey, you step a little bit more. If you're going to bear that Richardson name, there's a lot of pressure on you. a little
He's
bit
not
more
even in the
Devin.
two deep, is he, Anwar? I don't have him in my two deep. I don't think
he got to work in with the twos at the very end of team yesterday. It was the first time I'd ever seen him with the twos. He's been with the threes for all the camp. I mean, he's been with the group where 3 or 4 of the guys are walk-ons who you don't even recognize. So,
wow.
Alex, you got to Come On Son award winner.
Man, do you know what's crazy? I mean, Jason took my first one. Anwar took my backup. Those were the two that I was going to say.
I'm going to take your stuff now.
Thornton and Devin Richardson. I'm trying to think. Prince Dorba. Certainly that's a come on man kind of guy. He talk about a guy that was just probably the biggest loser in those defensive line drills yesterday. He was in a spot where he could come in, and it shouldn't have been that hard for him to be competing for Ray Thornton for the job, especially considering the fact that Ray Thornton he doesn't look like he's going to be that big of a game changer. I could be completely wrong about it, but it's just it doesn't seem like he's certainly no Joseph Osai, right? It isn't the same number 46 coming to DKR this season as last, but it felt like Prince Dorba should have made that thing a little bit tougher. As things stand, he's just getting to rotate in with the twos at that edge spot. He looks a little slight, kind of thin. And just the speed off the edge doesn't sort of match up with that. If you're going to be kind of slight and you're going to be kind of thin, you need to win with your speed rushes. He continues to try and convert, speed to power from inside to outside, and he gets swallowed up. So Prince Dorba would be my come on man, and that's crazy that we have 2 come on mans at that edge spot. It goes to show that as good as the defense looks, there is a bit of a weakness there.
Alex, when Alfred Collins bounced out to end yesterday,
I love that, man.
What did that lineup look like when he was at end?
It was Collins at the strong end, and then it was Moro Ajomo, Keandre Coburn, and Thornton. So he was lined up at a legit 4 or sometimes a 5 technique. And on the one play wherever he came inside across Kerstetter's face to just slant across his face to B gap and got upfield. He would have literally killed I forgot if it was Jonathan Brooks or whoever it was in the backfield at that point. I don't think it was Bijan, but it would have been an immense collision for a tackle for a loss. And you say, whoa, man, like this dude, coming inside like that. It was a lot different. It's interesting with Alfred Collins because, for the beginning of camp and all of spring ball, he played at nose tackle. And I'd started making the observation. It's like, it seems like he's playing more of the 3 technique or stuff like that and everything. It wasn't until I got to get a whole look at a practice where I looked at Jason. I said, is Alfred Collins big ass playing? Is he working out edge rush drills with these guys? Is he over here with the Jacoby Joneses of the world and the Thorntons and the Ben Davises? And yeah, he was doing the stuff where he's turning the corner around the tackling dummies and stuff like that. And sure enough, he was subbing in with during team drills, he was subbing in with the first group at that defensive end, which was a interesting look to say the least. And boy, man, it goes to show the versatility of a big man. Like, how much does Collins weigh? I mean, Collins is 6'5", 302 pounds with room to pack it on. You talk about a guy, if he can show that versatility along the defensive line, the kind of money he could eventually make is just, it's Yahtzee, man. So yeah, very, very, very interesting to see. Super exciting to see.
All right, guys, we've waited long enough. Time to talk quarterbacks. I feel like Anwar and I have done nothing but talk quarterbacks for the last, what do you think, 18 days, Anwar?
Yeah, I mean, you could just let Jason and Alex have the conversation at this point.
That's what I was going to say. Alex, Jason, just your updated thoughts. Alex, I'll start with you. I know we were just talking with you, but as the resident Casey Thompson fan club president, it felt like yesterday as I was reading your commentary in the practice thread, there was a bit of a change in how you were perceiving maybe just yesterday's practice, but where are you at with, given that this has been a week where Card has been taking the majority of the reps with the ones, which wouldn't be a huge thing, except it is a change from what's happened previously.
We're getting closer and closer to time, closer and closer to time to get this thing figured out and settled. And, I think that the change with me, it didn't really occur as much yesterday as it has been over the course of the last maybe 3 practices. I think that it was Anwar, what was it, practice 2 or 3 days ago when we were doing those things from 40 yards out. I forget when that was, but the way that the placement of the footballs from Hudson, when you just see these deep balls, you see he throws a tighter spiral. It's like he throws a prettier ball. That's never been in doubt. My question before was placement on the deep balls. And as we've gone through camp, I really feel like Hudson is kind of slowly, caught up with Casey, if not gotten a little bit better than him in that kind of stuff. You begin to look at him and Hudson Card looks pretty, he looks just as poised. I feel like he didn't really used to look just as I feel like during this short time of camp, we've seen Hudson Card really actually come along. And my opinion of him has sort of changed to where probably starting as like 3 practices ago, if I had to bet money on it, I would have bet money on Hudson being the starting quarterback. With that said, I have a little bit of a worry about it with just how we've seen these outside receivers just be no good with all these drops. They're not helping anybody out. They can't get any separation. They can't get open. They can't catch the football. And so I just wonder, is that whenever you look at Hudson Card, whenever he's throwing these, and I mentioned it earlier, when he's throwing these drag routes, when he's dumping it off to these running backs, it just reminds me of the old, some of these big strong arm quarterbacks in the NFL, he really whizzes it in there to these guys. And I wonder if they might like catching the football, these tight ends and these intermediate targets might like catching the football better from a Casey Thompson, if he could look better in that kind of role. I'm interested to find out. I don't know how it's going to work. I don't think either one has completely blown my socks off and made me say, geez, this guy's going to be the starter, which is probably a bit of an indictment on its own. But I think given the sum of all the parts and everything, and there are a lot of great things you can take away from these guys. You can also say this, and this will be the last thing I say. If either of them gets hurt or anything, Texas is screwed. Not to say that this kid Charles Wright or Cole Lord or any of these other guys are bad. I'm not saying that they're bad, but it's just like there's, it's like we're splitting hairs between these two guys, but we're not splitting hairs down to the others. It's a big difference. It's a big fall off. So, and that's in arm strength, that's in accuracy, that's in just general understanding of where the routes are going with these wide receivers. Miscommunications, everything. So I think it's good to know that you got two guys that are on this plane that are so high above one another. It's just a little bit disconcerting that there hasn't been one, at least anything that I've seen, that's come out and just really put his stamp on it and said, I'm for sure going to be the guy.
Jason, anything different from that?
Actually, yeah, Alex kind of stole a lot of my thoughts, if you will, kind of echo a lot of what he said. I mean, I think Hudson throws a beautiful ball. I mean, you watch it and you're like, oh my gosh. I mean, it is a tight spiral the way he spins it every time. I'm sitting there at practice and I mentioned it to Anwar. I kind of get a chuckle yesterday early in practice. They're throwing against air and I get it. Fans are there for a reason and they're cheering when Hudson throws a ball. I'm like, man, it's just playing pitch. That's like me and Catch out throwing. Of course, we'd be throwing 5 yard.
Oh God.
5 yard deep bombs at each other. But he's throwing. But I'm like, that doesn't impress me. Okay, I need to see it in action against live bullets and defense. But that being said, Hudson was much more accurate than Casey Thompson. So I can't sit here and say, okay, that doesn't do much for me when Hudson's dropping a beautiful ball over Troy O'Meary's shoulder with no defense on the field. But I can't say that without pointing out that Casey really struggled in some of those areas. But then halfway through the practice, I mean, everybody's making a big deal out of it. I look over on the sidelines and they're taking a water break, and Casey and Coach Sark are over there hamming it up and laughing and joking, having a good time. So I don't think either of them was too worried about Casey's maybe lack of accuracy issues in the early portions of camp. Both guys, I know Casey turned it over once, maybe I think twice actually. Hudson probably had one that probably should have been intercepted.
Wasn't there the Josh Thompson pick, or no, the Jameson pick on Hudson in the south end zone?
That was on Thompson, I believe. I'd have to take me a while to dig through my notes. I know the one to Brockermeyer was from Thompson. I thought that other one wasn't. I think BJ Foster, if I remember correctly, and I may be getting.
I remember in the notes that Jameson got card based on
card. Okay.
Jameson got card. Yeah.
Maybe Foster nearly picked off Thompson. Either way, okay. I mean, they're neither guy. I look at quarterbacks sometimes, and I watch. I'm a Steelers fan. For those who don't know, watches. I watch the Steelers, and I'm like, okay, Ben Roethlisberger's on the field, and for the most part, Steelers can march up and down the field, and sometimes it doesn't look too hard. And then when he's out, they put in their backup guys, and it's like, a lot of, even with starting quarterbacks, it just looks tough for those guys to move an offense down the field. Maybe they get a busted play here and they get 40 yards, and that makes it easier. But putting points on the board with some guys is just tough, man. And as I watch these quarterbacks, I kind of have that feeling. I'm like, I don't know that either of them, what I've seen so far, is going to consistently move this offense 60, 70, 80 yards for touchdown drives. Some of that, like Alex said, I think is the talent at receiver. Obviously, offensive line is going to play a big part of that, but I don't know. I mean, I know they didn't perform well in the scrimmage, neither guy. I wasn't blown away by what I saw yesterday, even in red zone drills. Yes, they each had touchdown passes, but a lot of that was based off of runs that set them up first and goal from the 5. And Thompson hits Gunnar Helm, which was essentially a blown coverage, and Card finished it off, I think, with a touchdown pass too. But I don't know. It just doesn't seem to flow very easily for either quarterback just yet. Maybe that's a product of the defense. I don't know, but I need to see more from both guys. If I'm a Texas fan watching these practices, reading these reports, it's a bit worrisome for me. I need to see more from one of these two guys before. I mean, right now, I think I was on record at 9-3. I think I bumped my prediction before fall camp started. I was at 8-4, went up to 9-3. I'm probably bumping it back to 8-4. And, you know, if you say, hey, what's the over and under on 8? Man, I'd have a hard time going over right now. I'm probably putting way too much stock into some of this, but I just need to see more. I need to hear more about these guys slicing things up and making it look easy. And yesterday was just a lot of check downs, and that's fine. It's an easy completion, but a check down sometimes for 1 yard, 2 yards isn't doing you a whole lot. So I think Alex said it earlier. It's going to be may have to be a lot of Bijan Robinson, a lot of Roschon Johnson, who I thought ran the ball really well yesterday. But if we're purely talking about quarterbacks, and if I'm being completely honest, the lack of ability of one of them to really elevate and take control is a bit of a red flag, because the chance has been there. Because if either guy was playing at a remotely high level, it'd be a super easy decision. We're saying, hey, this is a no-brainer. It's Hudson, it's Casey. But you know what? Neither guy's doing that. They're both playing, I would say, at a fairly average, maybe slightly above average level from what I've seen and heard. That's not good enough consistently, not in the Big 12, man. They need to be better. They need the guys around them to be better too. So, you got to point that out as well. But yeah, I don't want to be Mr. Negative, as some people like to say, but I need to see more from those guys.
Anwar, before we go into parting shots, I wanted to ask you a quarterback question. Thompson, I think there'd been signs behind the scenes that he loses the job, he's out of here, his stock is high, and he would want to strike while the iron is hot and get whatever he's going to do at the next level with another program to begin that process. It's so close. As Jason just said, if either of these guys had really been playing lights out, it's a cakewalk, I think, to the starting quarterback job at this point, because neither guy, by all reports, have been doing that. Thompson, do you still feel like if Thompson doesn't start the opener, is there any wiggle room at all? Do you think that he stays? Like, for some reason, I just have it in my head that both of these guys are going to play this year. Nothing's changed. I haven't heard that from anywhere, but it just seems like, I don't know. It just doesn't make a ton of sense for me to leave when it's still so close, seemingly.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't leave, right? And how the Thompson camp may have felt in the summer and how they feel today might be two different feelings, but to your point, I mean, I can see the potential if Card played against Louisiana that he struggles. Okay. I mean, you're going against a really good team, a top ranked team, and they're going to throw a bunch of things at a young quarterback that he's probably just never seen. Just probably has not. And with a bunch of, as I keep saying, a bunch of grown ass men on that Louisiana team, I can see the easy scenario where, he's maybe struggling, starting off slow, and you throw in Thompson and he has a chance. To me, Thompson, if he loses the job, and this is operating under the assumption that he doesn't win the job. If he loses the job, then yeah, I don't think Card is so far ahead that you can say, man, you're just not going to have a chance to play. He's going to struggle. There are going to be games that he's going to struggle. There's nothing I've seen so far, and maybe I'll be wrong, and maybe Thompson goes out and he is the next Aaron Rodgers of some sorts. But there's nothing I've seen from Card that makes me think first team all Big 12. Second team, nothing to that effect. I just see a good quarterback that might be really great in the future, but I just see good at this year. So, to your point, it probably behooves Thompson to hang around. If he ain't going to play anyway, at least here you have a chance to play. Whereas if you transfer somewhere else, you definitely solidify that you're not going to play anywhere. That this season, at least.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, let's go into parting shots. Does anybody want to volunteer to go first? Anybody got?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I thought about a little bit more about Attaboys. And so for my parting shot, I'll just throw in Roschon Johnson. I thought from a good Attaboy standpoint, he's been very consistent, very good on special teams. And he has a little bit more wiggle catch than I've seen before. He was pretty much like a north-south guy. And I don't know what he's been working on with Stan Drayton, or maybe just being around Bijan. You pick up on a couple of things. But there was a couple of times, especially on Wednesday, Well, I saw a guy, coming out, and I thought, oh man, what did Bijan just do? And I looked, I was like, oh, that was Roschon that did that. Okay. So for a kind of late attaboy, I want to throw for my partner shot that I think Roschon Johnson has been doing great in camp.
There you go. Good attaboy. What about you, Jason? You got a parting shot?
Not much. One more quarterback thing I forgot to mention. I kind of was thinking about this last night, and we've said this before about other sports and other positions. I mean, if they're pretty much equal, these quarterbacks, which I think they're pretty close, right? And let's say, right now I'd probably put Hudson a little bit ahead just because Casey's turned the ball over a little bit more. Let's say there's another scrimmage this Saturday. I think that's going to be the big telling point, probably even more so than the first scrimmage. I think Sark's going to be looking for one or both of those guys to really elevate their play. They should have one more scrimmage even after that. But things are usually settled by then. So this weekend will be key. But if they come out of this weekend and they're pretty even, which I'm pretty much expecting, I know last week we talked about Anwar. We said, hey, I think it was Anwar proposed that, or maybe Ketch, you did, but do you maybe if they're dead even, do you give Casey the nod so he maybe won't transfer? Well, that's one school of thought, but I thought about this yesterday. I was thinking, well, probably Hudson, if they're dead even, right? I think most would agree Hudson has a potentially higher ceiling. So if they're dead even, don't you go with the guy who has a higher ceiling? So in my mind, Casey really needs to elevate his game and put himself ahead of Hudson Card over this next week. And it really will start probably with the scrimmage this Saturday. So I think, these next roughly 7 days, that's probably about, I know Sark said he's got up until the season opener to make that decision, and he does, but surely he'd like to have it made before then as they start game prep for Louisiana. So I think the scrimmage this weekend is going to be big. The more I thought about it, I was like, I think Casey needs to take a big step forward and really take control of his job, because if he's even, I think Hudson probably is the guy that gets the nod just based on probably higher upside. He's even with less experience. I think most people would argue he has more physical tools, more natural tools. So I think this next week's going to be pretty telling. I'll be really interested to hear as we poke around on Saturday from the scrimmage, hopefully get some notes from there, hear what Sark has to say after the scrimmage. I think it's going to be a big day on Saturday.
By the way, Jason, I don't buy that whole he's got until the season opener to name a starter thing. You got to start preparing for Louisiana. You can't be, you got to get your first team guy as many reps as you can. So, he says by, he's going to start Louisiana prep midweek by next week. I think he's got to name a starter potentially Sunday or Monday, to be honest with you.
That's what I said. I figure if he's going to prep midweek next week, that tells me he probably should. He'd love to have a starter name by midweek next week. Technically, yeah, he could make a decision 10 minutes before kickoff, but I don't think anybody believes that, and I don't think Sark wants that.
No.
So.
He also wouldn't. He doesn't have to announce anything technically, right? He could he could wait until the first game, but this isn't a market where secrets. And I think Sark's probably learning that. Like, that I don't even know that practice was over on Monday, and there was already, discussion on the internet about the change that had taken place with regards to the snap allocation with the first team. I'm curious. I think it's over and I'll tell you why, because I kind of agree with what you're saying. I think that what Casey would have to do now, I think it would be different if we get to Thursday and it's like, even with the changes, Thompson's had a really good week, and there's a real buzz of, okay, Thompson he's found it. He found his fastball, and like now he's in a groove and it just looks different. Doesn't feel like that's happening. And I just wonder if by the time they get to the scrimmage, that data point becomes somewhat insignificant versus all of the other days of practice and data points that have acquired. I don't know. We'll see. I tend to think that we're watching the beginning of the adjustment that's being made. And considering it was Sark, this is my part and shot, and I'll go to Alex, but considering that it was Sark that made the decision to switch up the reps for the quarterbacks and that he seems happy with the way things have gone, I just keep asking myself, if you've made a decision and it seems to be paying off, Normally in life, we ride that decision way more than we go, okay, now let's do something completely opposite to see if something else changes now. But we shall see. Alex, what about you? Parting shot?
Well, I'll also talk about the big scrimmage this weekend and the starting quarterback, of course. I'm talking about the Indianapolis Colts at the Minnesota Vikings preseason game. And Sam Ehlinger is going to get the start this weekend, so that'll be exciting to see. I'm a little worried, man. After watching the Minnesota Denver last week, Mike Zimmer was so tilted. I don't think there's been a head coach in the NFL that's been more tilted just through the course of the whole preseason than Zimmer, man. Like the way he started, like his team's COVID vaccination rates were just so bad, and he couldn't understand why. And he was telling the media, he's like, he couldn't get it. And Kirk Cousins has to sit out, and so does Kellen Mond, and he's got no quarterbacks for practice, and he's just after practice, you can tell he's just about to blow a blood vessel. And then he goes to play the Broncos, and the Broncos put in a bunch of their starters. Minnesota puts in a bunch of their backups, and the Broncos defense outscored the Broncos defense on their own outscored Minnesota on the whole game, and just completely, Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater lighting these dudes up, and the big KJ Hamler 80-yard touchdown. I think Zimmer comes into this game pissed off. So I worry. I hope Sam goes in there, plays really well. Oh, and here's the other thing too about that Indianapolis Colts game. Did you guys see the Jordan Wilkins run where I think it was Wilkins? It might have been Benny LeMay, but at the end, whenever it was a nice run, the team kind of got behind him like in a ruck and maul kind of rugby kind of thing, and he gets up, he just does this little flex. He gets
hit him with the penalty.
Yeah, and so I looked at you look into this through the course of the week, and apparently the NFL is going to be making what was it I read? Like they're putting an emphasis on the taunting penalties this year, to where they're trying to make it no fun and everything. And I'm just like, man, if that is a peek into the kind of taunting penalties we're going to be getting, we're going to see a lot of flags start this season. I don't know if the NFL is wise to be going down this road. It feels like you should probably be going the other way, if anything else, because you can let these guys have a little bit of fun, dude. They're out there sacrificing their body. They've worked hard all week for this. Football players will tell you, I get paid to practice. I don't get paid to play in the game. So I'm out there having fun. Like, let them have some fun out there. My goodness. So that'll be my parting shot. As usual, Roger Goodell manages to piss off basically every contingency that there is in all of the NFL. Generally, you can keep one side happy and just piss off the other 50%. Goodell manages to piss off everybody with every single thing that he ever does. And maybe that's what makes him such a good commissioner. I don't know.
Did you see the John Mara press conference from the Giants, where Mara gets up there and he was talking about the penalties, and he basically said that the owners just decided they got tired of seeing the players talk to each other. And it was a very out of touch press conference, because he was like, nobody watches the games to see these guys taunt each other. And I was like, just so you know, my vote may not count, but I'm all for a little bit of trash talking and like a little bit of fun. I couldn't believe they hit that running back from the Colts. It was that penalty. It was egregious. I hope it's not like that for the season, for sure. That has to be the marker moment where they go back and say, okay,
that's a little too far, right?
We didn't mean quite that.
Right.
Because you're right. Like the dude got like a 10-yard extra, he got like 10 yards of yak through like a scrum. And he gets up and he's fired up, and they took the yards he gained after contact completely away because he got up a little bit excited. Come on, NFL.
Alex, you were not more surprised at seeing Tariq Black actually making catches in a preseason game, because that was shocking to me.
So Texas fans, you'll get to see Sam Ehlinger bombing it to Tariq Black and his old high school tight end Kylan Granson, and look on the other side should be Chris Boyd continuing to get plenty of runs. So
Malik Jefferson played like the majority of that game.
Malik Jefferson played a ton of snaps for this.
Is Malik going to make the Colts?
Well, he certainly looked like he was involved. To me, I'd have to pull up their depth chart and just sort of.
It looked like when he got cut by, what was it, the Bengals or the Browns? That
Bengals.
It started to feel like maybe we had hit the end, but I thought he played pretty well the other day. It's sad that we're watching Colts football so closely that
Hey,
that we
Alex.
even know we picked up on tendencies on the depth chart, and
Mhm.
there's just it felt like in that preseason game. Last thing I'll say, it felt like in that Colts preseason game that every player on both sides of the ball either went to Texas or was recruited by Texas or played against Texas. It felt like there was a storyline with every single guy in that game. It was just kind of strange. I don't know why I threw that in at the end here, but yeah, NFL preseason football. It's fantastic.
Hey, Alex, I have one question for you before we go.
Yeah.
What do you think happens first? Malik Jefferson makes the Colts, or Ketch actually sets a fantasy football
Knew that was
draft date in order? What do you think happens first?
Hey,
We need
I
to
made
get
a
the
post
reminder
on the
in.
board last week. Nobody replied.
We just need to keep reminding. We just need to keep
It's my
hammering.
fault that I asked everybody what date should we do the draft.
People gave you dates, Ketch.
Keep hammering.
What's that?
People gave dates of
Oh,
what work
shit.
that didn't work.
I never got the NFL. I never got the.
There's a thread.
Oh,
It
Yeah,
got bumped.
There's
It's
a
been-
long thread. Yeah, it's a long cat.
Oh, well,
Check it out.
apologies. You know what happened? I'm not getting the emails that tell me that Swindlopolis replied to my thread. Like I need to change my settings. So look, on behalf of Jason and Anwar and Alex, I've got work to do. Here's hoping by the next time we do the podcast, I don't have to, I knew Anwar was going to say that. Like I really was hoping to survive parting shots without a commissioner slam. Didn't happen. Damn it. For all of us, whatever. Goodbye. We'll talk to you next week.